What is up, everybody? Escape211 here, and today we are going to be focusing on the newest Onslaught event for Killshot. I wanted to do a video on this sooner, but I worked on a couple of other ones first. I actually did finish this event the day it came out. I just haven't been able to edit all of this, so I'm doing this kind of in post later, so you know that's why it is what it is. But I did want to do a general overview about this event and talking about, like, you know, some of the changes to it, give you some potential tips for each of the level sets and the groupings, and then give my overall thoughts for the event as a whole. So with that all said, here we go. So the general overview of this mode hasn't really changed all that much. We do see that some enemies, I would say, are a little bit harder, especially because we're introducing some new elements, mainly new weapons like the Viper and the fuse mortars that you'll see. So you may find the enemy is a little tougher. However, at the same time, we also have a new function, which would be these like healing elements. This is coming in two forms, like a healing pad or a way that, like, after a wave finishes, you will get a heal. The healing pad is nice that you can pick it up whenever you want, and it seems like it heals about like a third of your health. But once you use it, once it goes away, or once the wave is gone, it will also disappear, and there may be new pads that come up. On some levels, you will get a heal after the wave is done, and that is another way you can get that heal. That seems to be a more significant heal. I'm not sure if it's a full heal, but it is more significant, so that is a handy thing. But those are like the major things that have changed. Now I want to shift focus over to the level sets, and I want to talk about the first four because they're all trial levels, and they give you these maxed weapons with the max kill shot to use. Generally, these are the easiest and probably the only ones that most people will play just because they are entirely free, but it's a good chance to be able to use some of these weapons you haven't been able to otherwise, and it actually sets up the tone for the rest of this because you're going to be using all these weapons through the rest of the levels should you choose to do them. Generally speaking, though, yeah, the minigun and the, I would say, repeater are actually pretty easy to get used to. The disruptor is a little bit harder if you haven't used it, has a slight learning curve, and then of course the hardest would be the pod gun. I actually think the fourth level with the pod gun is the most difficult, just because that damage delay is going to be the tricky one for people to deal with, especially as waves start to come in on you, especially like the surges, right? You want to be able to kill those as quickly as possible, and with that damage delay, it can be a little tricky, but this is a good time for most people to get used to those, especially if you plan to do the other levels like I mentioned. But yeah, good overall for these first four levels. Now that is where most people will stop, but if you are someone that does want to finish these levels, has the weapons, resources, that kind of stuff, I do want to give you some general thoughts on each of these. As we get into levels 5 and 6, you will be on Skyship, focusing on the Disruptor. This one is not too bad, 5 specifically, just because you will be able to mostly stay in your home base and fight enemies, and most of them will come to you. You might have to move out a little bit for some targets, but most of them you can stay right in the home base, so it's very little like commitment that you need to do on your part. There are some tricky surges that you have to deal with, but aside from that, yeah, most everything here is pretty solid. 6 is a little bit trickier, but not by a whole lot, mainly because you can't stay in your home base the whole time. You'll have these ordnance or mortar type mechs that you're going to have to deal with because you won't be able to just reach them from your home base. But even these aren't too bad. Maybe about halfway or like 2/3 the way through, you'll have to come out and deal with these, and then you can, you know, end up in a safe area like this where you can take out your target. So generally speaking, not too bad either overall. Now when we get down to 7, you are again on Skyship, and you have your repeater. This time you're going to have to deal with the MD and the pod guns, and they are annoying, especially when you first start, where you have this one instance of a single one. You have to kill him, and then other waves will just pop up right on you. This is kind of a trap, and because you have the repeaters, you kind of have to deal with it right up in the face. So this one is a bit tricky to deal with, but you do get your full heal at the end of each wave, so you can take care of these. There are going to be a few times that these pop up in these tunnels, so you want to be aware of it, especially on this level. Level 8 starts out with the bang because you're going to have to fight a commander right at the center. I suggest backing up like I did here, and then being able to bait out some of his fire. It's a vortex with storm racks, so if you can bait out his fire, he will be a bit of a sitting duck, which is pretty nice, and then it makes it an easy one for you to deal with in this way. You will also have another one of those pesky MDs in the bottom, like this, where they just kind of bait out your fire. This one you don't start in the tunnel with, so I tried to start from above it and get some of its pods out, but again, it's still hard not to get hit by this one. You still get the full heal, so generally speaking, you should be all right, but yeah, it's a pain to deal with these tunnels where they just feel like they trap you. The end of this level is a little tricky, but it's kind of fun. You actually have to fight 2 commanders all together. This actually isn't super bad if you focus again. It's a Vortex with the Stormwreck build, but the other one is an Onyx, and that's more of a pain. It has a guided missile. I don't know if it's Javs or Helix, one of the two. And then it has, of course, its quad rocket with it, and then also cryo launcher. So it's actually hard to engage this guy, and you got to try to pick a certain time when you can try to engage him, when he doesn't have his, abilities ready or anything like that, or when you can kind of get around him and corner shoot. Now we get into the real meat and potatoes, the most difficult. 9 and 10 were the hardest levels for me to complete. I don't know if they will be for anyone else, but they certainly were for me, partly because I only had one pod gun, but partly the mixture of enemies that they have here. They have MDs with the pod guns, which are a pain to not take some damage from, and they had plenty of surges that will also get in your face. They also have different fuse mortar mechs. I think they're just the slingshots with those. So it limits the actual places you can go. What I found works the best is to stay along the outsides of the entire map. You have good overhead cover on the outsides, and you can keep your distance from your targets how you want to be able to deal with them. And yeah, it was definitely a tricky one, or a tricky set here on this first one. So that's ultimately what you got to do for level 9. Level 10 is more of the same. Again, very difficult to deal with these surges and the MDs and the ordnances, but you also will have more waves you have to deal with, lovely, and a commander at the end. This is a Scorpius with a mixed build, so it's going to be a bit annoying to deal with as well. So you're going to have to be careful and pick your battles on it. It is possible to do for sure, and if you're able to deal with the commander, remember, killing him will end the level. So if you can get a good opportunity to fight that Scorpius, definitely do it. Even if you have to chip away at it with the pods while avoiding other enemies, it's worth doing if you can kill them. Next, we have levels 11 and 12 to finish this out, and these focus on the Disc Launcher 12, which honestly was way easier to me to deal with, just because, you know, I had a nearly maxed Disc Launcher 12, so I had dual copy, but also because this is just a weapon I'm more familiar with, and that damage radius on weaker enemies like this is super helpful to just take out waves and waves of enemies, so a lot easier for level 11 here. Level 12 was also not that bad. This didn't have many waves overall, but the waves were longer, and then of course you have the commander at the end. This is the Scorpius commander once again, so not too bad to deal with. At least it didn't feel like it with the discs. I was able to take him out pretty effectively without taking too much damage. So yeah, I mean, just a much easier time for me with this weapon to finish it out. Felt like cake compared to 9 and 10. Those were definitely the end game levels for me in this whole experience. So that covers each of the different levels and my overall tips that I can give you guys. Generally speaking, I did overall like this event, at least better than the Scorpius one. There's different things that are more beneficial in this one. First of all, the trial levels are all up front. It did no good. It was pretty much useless to put trial levels later, so that some people didn't even get to play those trial levels unless they spent money. So I like that all of them are up front. I also like that this focuses on Killshot, which is an easier one or more reasonable for people to get, and a decent amount of people have Killshot. But of course, I did not like, you know, all of these weapons being legendary and being weapons that, even though they are now accessible on the Gear Hub, are not reasonable for people to get, right? There's not a whole lot of people that are going to spend so much on legendary 8 energy weapons to be able to complete this event. That's absurd. No one's going to do that. I mean, a Podgun 10 is kind of interesting, but it's still not something that I think anybody should spend their time invest into, especially as you play with the Podguns early on and try the 12s. You'll find how they play, and I think for a lot of people, they don't really fit for like long-term or meta play. They are just really a fun, interesting weapon. And that is a good thing, of course. Obviously, in this beginning part, these are weapons that not many people have played with, so you'll get to do that in the trial. That's another good thing. And for better or worse, I guess the overall, winning that you get from this, the actual rewards on this are not good. I think that the only quote-unquote good thing is this skin, and even that is just a reskin of Doomscream, which is unfortunate. The effect that it has with the, you know, kind of burn into the ground with the skid marks is cool, but it's not something that I think justifies the overall cost potential that people will put into it. I just happen to have access to all that kind of stuff that most people don't, and that's why I did it. Otherwise, I would say it is not worth the money to get into it. I mean, if you're someone who wants to buy stuff from the Onslaught shop early on, you know, and you want to have some early access to certain weapons, that's okay. But I mean, if you're late in the game, these are not things that you should spend money on or waste time on. So in that sense, it's not good. But you also have to remember, these kind of events are trying to do a lot of things. They're trying to let, you know, free-to-play players get access to some things, to try them in trial levels and do some resources, and then be able to get some things that are on the Gear Hub. And they're trying to allow those who spend money to give them a collectible for the end of this. So I understand what they try to do with the PvE, and I also think the idea of using this as a way to release weapons onto the Gear Hub isn't terrible. I just wish that it would happen faster, so that a lot of stuff would get there a lot sooner that we haven't had access to for a long time. So hopefully that happens more often. Overall, I thought this was better than Scorpius, but I think there's still a lot to go. One thing I'd love to see more of in these is some of the pilots and interaction and like lore that happens. Even if like at the beginning of each level they had like a little write-up here on the side or somewhere that talks about, like, you know, the different pilots, and then the commanders were the opposing pilot that you're supposed to fight, and maybe have some connected dialogue elements, just so that there's some lore to PvE, because right now it is really, really bland to me. But, you know, overall, like I said, some of the things they've changed are improvements from the last one. It just has a long way to go. So that's my general thought on this overall event. You guys can let me know your thoughts below, and we will see you out there on the battlefield.